"Step away from the vehicle, sir. You don't belong here." The guard's hand slammed against the truck's window so hard, it cracked. Inside, a 6-year-old girl screamed and clutched her teddy bear. Her father, Marcus Bennett, sat motionless behind the wheel, knuckles white on the steering wheel, jaw clenched tight. He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply looked at his daughter's terrified face in the rearview mirror and made a decision that would destroy careers before the hour ended. What they didn't know? The mansion behind those gates belonged entirely to the man they just threatened. And the little girl they terrified? She was about to watch her father dismantle an entire security empire without raising his voice. Before we continue, drop your city or country in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit that subscribe button. Stories like this deserve to be heard. Now, back to Marcus Bennett and the longest night of his life. The truck sputtered as Marcus Bennett pulled up to the Thornwood Estate entrance. The engine had been making that sound for 3 years now. A tired, wheezing protest that embarrassed him every time he dropped Emma off at school. He'd meant to fix it. He'd meant to do a lot of things. But fixing a truck meant time away from Emma. And time away from Emma wasn't something Marcus Bennett could afford. Not anymore. "Daddy, is this really our new house?" Emma's voice floated from the back seat, soft and wondering. Marcus caught her reflection in the rearview mirror, those wide blue eyes that looked exactly like her mother's, the tangled blonde hair he still couldn't figure out how to braid properly. "Yeah, sweetheart, this is home now." "It's really big." "It is." "Mommy would have liked it." Marcus's throat tightened. He gripped the steering wheel harder. "Yeah, baby, she would have loved it." The iron gates loomed ahead, tall and imposing against the evening sky. Marcus had bought this place 6 months ago, but between closing the deal on his company and handling the endless paperwork, he hadn't actually moved in yet. Tonight was supposed to be special. Their first night in the home Sarah had dreamed about before the cancer took her. He rolled down his window as he approached the guard station. A man in a crisp uniform stepped out, clipboard in hand, eyes already scanning the truck with barely concealed disdain. "Can I help you?" "Marcus Bennett. I'm the new owner of—" "Hold on." The guard raised his hand, cutting Marcus off mid-sentence. He looked at the truck, at the rust spots on the fender, at the cracked windshield. His lip curled slightly. "New owner of what, exactly?" "The Thornwood Estate. This property." The guard laughed. Not a chuckle, a full dismissive laugh that echoed across the quiet street. "Right, and I'm the president." He leaned closer, his breath sharp with coffee and contempt. "Look, buddy, I don't know what you're trying to pull, but deliveries go around back. Service entrance is on Maple." "I'm not making a delivery. I own this house." "Sure you do." Another guard emerged from the station, younger, broader, with a kind of swagger that came from a badge and too little oversight. He positioned himself at the front of the truck, arms crossed. "Problem here, Reynolds?" "Guy says he owns the place." The younger guard snorted. "In that thing?" He kicked the truck's bumper. The whole vehicle shuddered. "Daddy?" Emma's voice trembled from the back seat. Marcus turned quickly. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just stay in your seat." "Why are they being mean?" "They're not being mean, baby. They're just confused." But they weren't confused. Marcus knew that look. He'd seen it 100 times before. In the eyes of bankers who assumed he couldn't afford the loan. In the smirks of salesmen who ignored him at car dealerships. In the raised eyebrows of teachers who couldn't believe a single father was raising a daughter alone. It was the look that said, "You don't belong here." The older guard, Reynolds, rapped his knuckles against the truck's hood. "All right, fun's over. Turn this thing around before we have to make this official." "I'm not going anywhere. This is my property." Your property, Reynolds laughed again, but there was an edge to it now. Mister, the man who owns this place is worth more than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. He doesn't drive a truck that belongs in a junkyard. People are more than what they drive. Not around here, they're not. Reynolds pulled out his radio. I'm calling this in. We've got a trespasser at the main gate. The word hit Marcus like a slap. Trespasser. At his own home, a sleek black car pulled up behind him, and a woman stepped out. Mid-40s, sharp features, blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She wore a white dress that probably cost more than Marcus's truck, and she walked like she owned the street. What's the holdup? Her voice cut through the evening air like glass. I have dinner reservations. Sorry, Mrs. Ashford, just dealing with a situation. Victoria Ashford. The name registered somewhere in Marcus's memory. HOA president, according to the closing documents. The woman who'd sent him 14 emails about community standards before he'd even unpacked a single box. She walked up to the truck and peered inside, her eyes traveling from Marcus's worn hoodie to the fast food wrappers on the passenger seat, to Emma in the back with her teddy bear. Is there a problem here? No problem, ma'am, Reynolds said. Gentleman claims he owns the Thornwood estate. Victoria's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. Is that so? She looked at Marcus the way someone might look at a stain on expensive carpet. And who exactly are you supposed to be? Marcus Bennett. Never heard of you. That doesn't change who I am. Victoria's eyes narrowed. She leaned closer to the window, close enough that Marcus could smell her perfume, something expensive and suffocating. Let me explain something to you, Mr. Bennett, if that's even your real name. This neighborhood has standards. We have expectations. And those expectations do not include, she gestured at the truck, at him, at everything he represented. Whatever this is. I understand you have expectations, but I own this property. I have the deed. You have nothing. Victoria's voice turned to ice. Except a rusted truck, a delusional story, and apparently a child you've dragged into your little scheme. My daughter isn't part of any scheme. Then why is she here? Because she's my daughter, and this is our home. Victoria stepped back, shaking her head slowly. Reynolds, I want this man removed from the premises. Immediately. Yes, ma'am. Marcus felt the shift in the air. The guards moved differently now, purposefully, with the kind of authority that came from permission to act. The younger one started around to the driver's side. Reynolds unclipped something from his belt. Sir, step out of the vehicle. I'm not stepping anywhere. This is my property. Sir, I won't ask again. Daddy? Emma's voice cracked. Daddy, I'm scared. Marcus's heart clenched. He looked at his daughter, his baby girl, the only thing Sarah had left him, the reason he got up every morning and worked every night and built a company from nothing. She was pressed against the back seat, teddy bear crushed to her chest, eyes wet with tears she was trying not to let fall. This was supposed to be her night, their first night in their new home, the home her mother had sketched on napkins during chemo treatments, the home Sarah had described in detail during those long nights when the pain was too much and dreaming was all she had left. It's okay, sweetheart, Marcus said softly. Everything's going to be okay. Doesn't look okay from where I'm standing. Victoria crossed her arms, a thin smile on her lips. Perhaps you should listen to the nice officers before this gets any more embarrassing for you. The younger guard yanked open the driver's door. Out! Now! Marcus didn't move. I said out! The guard grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled. Hard. Marcus stumbled out of the truck, catching himself against the door. Daddy! Emma screamed. "Stay in the car, baby. Don't move." But Emma was already scrambling, trying to reach the door handle with her small fingers. Reynolds moved toward the rear of the truck. "Might want to check on the kid. Make sure she's not stolen." The words stopped Marcus cold. Stolen. They thought he'd stolen his own daughter. "Don't you touch her." Marcus's voice came out low, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something that made the younger guard hesitate. "Don't you dare touch my daughter." "Sir, we need to verify." "Verify what? She's my child. She's my daughter. Her mother died 2 years ago, and I've raised her alone every single day since. I fed her, clothed her, held her when she cried for her mommy in the middle of the night. Don't you dare tell me she's not mine." Reynolds paused, radio halfway to his mouth. The younger guard loosened his grip slightly, but Victoria stepped forward, unmoved. "Emotional manipulation, classic con artist technique." She turned to the guards. "Don't fall for it. Call the police, and call Child Protective Services." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. CPS. They wanted to take Emma. "You can't do that." "I can do whatever I want to protect this community." "She's my daughter." "So you keep saying. Yet here you are, in a truck that's falling apart, trying to claim ownership of a $10 million estate." Victoria tilted her head, studying him. "Where's your proof, Mr. Bennett? Where's your documentation, your identification?" "In my wallet." "And you expect us to believe some fake ID and forged papers?" "They're not forged." "Everyone says that." A small crowd had begun to gather. Neighbors emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Some held phones, recording. Others whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Marcus could hear fragments of their conversations. "Doesn't look like he belongs." "Poor kid must be terrified." "Security should just arrest him." This was wrong. All of it was wrong. He'd spent his entire life being judged, for his clothes, his car, his background. He'd built a company worth hundreds of millions, from a laptop in his dead wife's hospital room. He'd closed deals with Fortune 500 CEOs, while his daughter slept in a portable crib beside him. He'd earned every dollar, every achievement, every inch of his success. And still, they looked at him and saw a trespasser. The guard's radio crackled. "Dispatch, this is Reynolds at Thornwood Main Gate. We have a potential trespassing situation. Suspect claims to own the property. Possibly has a minor in his vehicle. Needs CPS and police response." "Copy that. Units en route." Emma's sobs cut through the static. "Daddy, please. I want to go inside. I want to go home." Marcus looked at his daughter, then at the guards, then at Victoria Ashford with her smug smile and cold eyes. He thought about Sarah, about the nights she'd spent describing this house, this dream, this future they'd build together. He thought about the promise he'd made her in the hospice, when she could barely speak, when every word cost her everything she had left. "Take care of Emma," she'd whispered, "and don't ever let anyone make her feel less than she is." Marcus had held her hand and sworn he would. He'd sworn on everything he had. And now, standing in front of the gates of the home he'd bought to honor that promise, surrounded by people who saw him as nothing, he remembered something else Sarah used to say. "Your silence is your strength, Marcus. Let them talk. Let them assume. And when they're done, show them who you really are." He stopped fighting, stopped arguing, stopped trying to convince people who had already made up their minds. Instead, Marcus Bennett did what he did best. He waited. The younger guard shoved him toward the front of the truck. "Stay right there. Don't move." Marcus didn't move. Reynolds approached the rear door. "Little girl, I need you to step out of the vehicle." Emma shook her head frantically. "No, I want my daddy." Your daddy's in trouble, sweetheart. We need to make sure you're safe.
I am safe. My daddy keeps me safe.
Victoria sighed impatiently. Just get her out of there. The police will sort this mess when they arrive. Reynolds reached for the door handle, and that's when the gate's security panel flickered to life. A soft chime echoed across the driveway. Everyone froze. The guards, Victoria, even the gathering crowd. The screen beside the gate lit up with a cool blue glow, and a mechanical whir filled the air as something activated within the system. A red light swept across the driveway, pausing briefly on each face. Reynolds, the younger guard. Victoria, the bystanders with their phones. And finally, Marcus. The light turned green. A smooth, feminine voice spoke from hidden speakers, clear and unmistakable in the evening quiet. Facial recognition confirmed. Welcome home, Mr. Bennett. Nobody moved. Victoria's smile faltered. Reynolds's hand dropped from the door handle. The younger guard took an involuntary step back. "What did it just say?" someone in the crowd whispered. The screen displayed a photograph. Marcus, in a suit, shaking hands with a man at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Below it, text scrolled. Owner, Marcus Bennett. Access, unlimited. Reynolds shook his head. That's got to be a glitch. The system's been buggy. It's not a glitch, Marcus said quietly. It's facial recognition. Military grade. I helped design it. Victoria stepped forward, her composure cracking. You're lying. You hacked it somehow. This is exactly what I'd expect from someone like you. Someone like me? You know exactly what I mean. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, steady, and absolutely certain. Someone like me built a cybersecurity company from nothing. Someone like me sold that company for $400 million. Someone like me bought this house 6 months ago because my dying wife dreamed about it. He paused. Someone like me is the reason you have a security system at all, Mrs. Ashford. My company installed it. The color drained from Victoria's face. The crowd's whispers turned to gasps. Phones lifted higher, recording every second. From the back seat of the truck, Emma's small voice broke through the silence. Daddy, are we going home now? Marcus looked at his daughter, at her tear-streaked face and her mother's eyes, and felt something shift inside him. Yeah, baby, he said softly. We're going home. He turned back to the guards, to Victoria, to all the people who had looked at him and seen nothing but a threat. But first, Marcus said, reaching slowly into his pocket, I have a few calls to make. The phone felt heavy in his hand, not from weight, from consequence, from the knowledge of what came next. He dialed a single number and raised the phone to his ear. Nia, we have a situation at the main gate. A woman's voice responded instantly, crisp and professional. I see it, sir. Cameras are recording. What do you need? Marcus looked at Reynolds, at the younger guard, at Victoria Ashford with her designer dress and her designer contempt. Pull their files, all of them, and prepare a termination notice for the entire security detail. Reynolds' face went white. Now wait just a minute. Effective immediately, Marcus continued, his voice never rising above conversational. Revoke all access codes. Disable all badges. And Nia? He paused, letting the silence stretch. Make sure it's documented. Every word, every action, every threat they made to my daughter. I want it all on record. Understood, sir. Processing now. The younger guard grabbed Marcus's shoulder. You can't do this. You can't just... Remove your hand, Marcus said quietly, or the lawsuit will be the least of your problems. The guard's hand dropped like it had been burned. Behind them, the gates began to open. Slow, deliberate. Inevitable. Golden lights flickered to life along the driveway, illuminating the path to the mansion Marcus had bought, the home his wife had dreamed of, the future his daughter deserved. Victoria stumbled backward.
This can't be.
It is. Marcus walked to the rear door of his truck and opened it gently. Emma scrambled into his arms, burying her face in his neck, her small body shaking with residual fear. "It's okay, baby," he whispered. "We're home now. No one's going to hurt us." He turned one last time to face the crowd. The guards with their dead badges, Victoria with her shattered assumptions, the neighbors with their phones still recording. His voice carried across the driveway, calm and clear. "You looked at my truck and saw a poor man. You looked at my clothes and saw a con artist. You looked at my daughter and saw a kidnapping victim." He held Emma closer. "You never once thought to look at me and see a father. A widower. A man who built everything he has from nothing." Reynolds tried to speak.
Sir, we were just doing our jobs.
"Your job was to protect this property. Instead, you threatened its owner and traumatized his child." Marcus's eyes were steady. "You had one job, and you failed." The radio on Reynolds' belt crackled one final time, then it went silent. His badge flickered. Once, twice, then it went dark. "Access revoked," Nia's voice announced from the gate speakers. "Employment terminated. Security clearance permanently suspended." The younger guard stared at his own badge as the light died. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. But it was. And as Marcus Bennett carried his daughter through the gates of their new home, the message hung heavy in the night air for everyone to hear. True power doesn't need to shout. It just needs to remember who tried to silence it. The gates closed behind them with a sound like a verdict being delivered. Marcus didn't look back. He couldn't. Emma's small arms were wrapped so tight around his neck that he could barely breathe. But he wouldn't have loosened her grip for anything in the world.
"Daddy,"
she whispered against his shoulder.
"are the mean people gone?"
"They can't hurt us anymore, sweetheart."
"Promise?"
Marcus pressed his lips to her forehead. "I promise." But even as he said the words, he heard footsteps behind them. Fast, determined. The click of heels on pavement, getting closer. "You can't just walk away from this." Victoria Ashford's voice cut through the night air like shattered glass. Marcus stopped, but didn't turn around. He could hear her struggling with the pedestrian gate, yanking at the handle that no longer responded to her access code. "Open this gate. I'm the HOA president. I have rights." "You have nothing," Marcus said quietly, still facing the house. "Not anymore." "This isn't over, Mr. Bennett. I'll have lawyers here by morning. I'll have the police investigate you. I'll have every news outlet in the city asking questions about how a man like you suddenly owns a mansion like this." Marcus turned slowly. Victoria stood on the other side of the iron bars, her perfect composure finally cracking. Her hair had come loose from its tight arrangement. Her white dress was smudged where she'd grabbed the gate. And her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, were wild with fury. "A man like me," Marcus repeated. "Tell me, Mrs. Ashford, what kind of man am I?" "You know exactly what I mean." "Say it." "I don't have to say anything." "You've been saying it all night, with every look, every assumption, every time you glanced at my truck, my clothes, my daughter." Marcus's voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath. "So say it, out loud, on camera." He gestured toward the security cameras positioned along the gate, their red lights blinking steadily. Victoria's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. "That's what I thought," Marcus shifted Emma in his arms. You're brave enough to think it. You're brave enough to act on it. But you're not brave enough to own it. This isn't about, it's about exactly what you think it's about. And now everyone who watched tonight knows it too. From beyond the gate, Marcus could hear the murmur of the crowd. The phones were still out, still recording. Tomorrow, this would be everywhere. By next week, it would be a story people shared at dinner tables and in break rooms. Victoria Ashford would become a symbol of something ugly, and she was only just beginning to realize it. "You'll regret this," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. "You don't know who I am, who I know. I know exactly who you are. You're the woman who tried to have my daughter taken from me at the gates of my own home. You're the woman who looked at a grieving widower and saw a con artist. You're the woman who thought a truck and a hoodie told you everything you needed to know about a person." Marcus paused. "And you're the woman who's about to find out what happens when you're wrong." He turned and walked toward the house. Emma still clutched to his chest. "This isn't over!" Victoria screamed behind him. "Do you hear me? This isn't over!" But it was. At least, that chapter was. The front door recognized Marcus's approach and unlocked automatically. Warm light spilled out onto the porch as he stepped inside, and Emma lifted her head for the first time since they'd passed through the gates. "Daddy, it's so big!" Marcus looked around the foyer. The soaring ceilings, the curved staircase, the chandelier that Sarah had picked out from a catalog during one of her better days. She'd circled it with a red pen and written, "Someday," in the margin. That magazine was still in a box somewhere, packed away with all the other pieces of her that Marcus couldn't bring himself to throw away. "It is big, isn't it?" He set Emma down gently, keeping hold of her hand. "Want to see your room?" "I have a room?" "You have the best room in the whole house. Your mommy picked it out." Emma's eyes went wide. "Mommy picked my room?" "She picked everything, sweetheart. Every color, every piece of furniture, every little detail. She planned it all, just for you." "But Mommy's in heaven." Marcus knelt down, bringing himself to Emma's eye level. This was the part that never got easier. The questions, the explanations, the impossible task of helping a 6-year-old understand why her mother wasn't coming back. She is in heaven, but before she went there, she worked really hard to make sure you'd have the perfect room. She drew pictures of it. She picked out the colors. She even picked out the curtains. "What color are the curtains?" "Purple, with little stars on them." Emma's face lit up. "Purple's my favorite." "I know, baby." Mommy knew too. They walked through the house together, Emma's small hand warm in his. Every room held a piece of Sarah. The kitchen she'd designed for big family dinners they'd never have. The living room with the fireplace she'd wanted for Christmas mornings. The office where she'd imagined Marcus working while she read on the couch nearby. And then they reached Emma's room. Marcus opened the door and watched his daughter's face transform. The walls were painted a soft lavender. The bed had a white canopy with tiny fairy lights woven through the fabric. The curtains, purple with silver stars, caught the light and seemed to shimmer. And in the corner, a small white bookshelf was already filled with books that Sarah had ordered months before she died. Books she'd never gotten to read to her daughter. "Daddy," Emma's voice was barely a whisper, "it's like a princess room." "That's because you're a princess." "Mommy really made this?" "Every bit of it." Emma ran to the bed and climbed up, her teddy bear still clutched in one hand. She lay down in the center, arms spread wide, staring up at the canopy and the fairy lights. "I can see the stars, Daddy." Just like Mommy wanted. "Do you think she can see me? From heaven?" Marcus's throat tightened. He walked to the bed and sat on the edge, brushing Emma's hair back from her forehead. "I think she sees you every single day, sweetheart. I think she watches over you, and she's so proud of the little girl you're becoming. I miss her. I miss her too. Why did she have to go away? It was the question Emma asked at least once a week, and Marcus still didn't have a good answer. How do you explain cancer to a child? How do you make sense of something that makes no sense at all? Sometimes, he said carefully, people get sick in a way that doctors can't fix. It's not fair. It's not right, but it happens. And when it happened to Mommy, she fought so hard, baby. She fought every single day because she wanted to stay with us. She wanted to watch you grow up. She wanted to be here for your first day of school and your birthdays and all of it. But she couldn't stay. No, she couldn't. But before she left, she made me promise something. What did she make you promise? Marcus leaned down and kissed Emma's forehead. She made me promise to take care of you, to love you enough for both of us, to make sure you always knew how special you are and how much she loved you, and that you could do anything you set your mind to. He smiled softly. And she made me promise to never let anyone make you feel less than you are. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she said, "Is that why you got mad at the mean lady?" I wasn't mad, sweetheart. You looked mad. I was protective. There's a difference. What's the difference? Marcus thought about how to explain it. When someone you love is in danger, you do whatever you have to do to keep them safe. That's not anger. That's love. It's love that makes you strong when you need to be strong. Is that why you were so quiet? Because love made you strong? Out of the mouths of babes. Marcus smiled despite himself. Something like that. Mommy used to say that too. She said you were the strongest, quiet person she ever met. Did she? She said when other people yelled, you just got more quiet. And that's how she knew you were serious. Marcus laughed softly. Sarah had always understood him better than anyone. Even now, 2 years after her death, she was still teaching their daughter lessons about him that he didn't know how to teach himself. Your mommy was very smart. I know. Emma yawned, her eyes starting to droop.
Daddy?
Yeah, baby?
Are the mean people going to come back?
Marcus looked at his daughter, this perfect, precious child who had already lost so much. She deserved to feel safe. She deserved a home where no one could touch her, threaten her, or make her afraid. No, sweetheart, they're not coming back. I won't let them.
Promise?
I promise. Emma's eyes closed. Within minutes, her breathing slowed into the steady rhythm of sleep. Marcus sat beside her for a long time, watching her chest rise and fall, letting the silence of the house settle around him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He stepped out of Emma's room, closing the door quietly behind him, and checked the screen. Nia. Sir, we have a situation developing outside the gates. What kind of situation? The crowd hasn't dispersed. If anything, it's gotten larger. And Mrs. Ashford appears to be organizing something. Marcus walked to the window at the end of the hall. From here he could see the main gate and the street beyond. Nia was right. There were more people now than before. Cars had parked along the curb. Flashlights and phone screens dotted the darkness like fireflies. What's she organizing? I'm not certain, but she's been on her phone constantly since you went inside. I've identified at least 3 local news vans approaching from the south. News vans? Yes, sir. It appears Mrs. Ashford is trying to control the narrative. Of course she was. Victoria Ashford had built her entire identity around control. Control of her neighborhood, her community, her carefully curated world. Tonight, Marcus had stripped that control away, and she was scrambling to get it back. What's the coverage going to look like? Based on the live streams that have already gone viral, public sentiment is overwhelmingly on your side. The footage of the guards threatening Emma and Mrs. Ashford's comments have been viewed over 2 million times in the past 45 minutes. 2 million views. Marcus let that sink in. Tomorrow, his face would be everywhere. His story would be everywhere. The privacy he'd worked so hard to maintain was gone. "Sir, there's something else." "What is it?" "The guards you terminated, Reynolds and the others, they're still at the gate. They're refusing to leave." "They can't get in." "No, sir, but they're talking to the news crews. And based on what I'm hearing, they're claiming wrongful termination. They're saying you fabricated the security footage, that you hacked the system." Marcus felt a cold anger settle in his chest. Not hot, explosive anger, the kind that made people do stupid things. This was different. This was the kind of anger that crystallized into action. "Is the full footage secured?" "Yes, sir. Unedited, time-stamped, backed up to 3 separate servers." "Good. Pull everything we have on Reynolds and his team. Every incident report, every complaint, every time they stopped someone at the gate without proper cause." "Sir?" "If they want to play this game, Nia, we'll play it. But we'll play it with facts, not accusations." "Understood. I'll have the files ready within the hour." Marcus ended the call and stood at the window, watching the circus unfold below. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. He'd imagined carrying Emma over the threshold, showing her each room, watching her face light up the way it had when she'd seen her bedroom. He'd imagined a quiet dinner, maybe unpacking a few boxes, settling into the first night of their new life. Instead, he was standing in an empty hallway, planning his defense against people who had tried to destroy him simply because he didn't look like what they expected. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Bennett, my name is David Chen. I'm a reporter with the Tribune. I'd like to hear your side of the story. I promise fair coverage." Marcus stared at the message. Then another came in from a different number, and another, and another. Within minutes, his phone was flooded with requests from journalists, podcasters, TV producers, all wanting a piece of the story that was spreading across the internet like wildfire. He turned the phone off. Downstairs, he could hear sounds from outside. Voices, car doors, the low hum of generators powering camera equipment. The world was gathering at his gates, hungry for a story that wasn't theirs to tell. Marcus walked back to Emma's room and cracked the door open. She was still asleep, one arm draped over her teddy bear, her face peaceful in the soft glow of the fairy lights. This was why he'd built everything he'd built. Not for the money, not for the recognition, not for any of the things people assumed when they heard about his success. He'd built it for her, for the chance to give his daughter the life Sarah had dreamed about, the security and stability that would let her grow up without the fear that had defined so much of his own childhood. And tonight, a group of strangers had tried to take that away. They'd looked at him and seen nothing but their own prejudices reflected back. They'd threatened his daughter, tried to rip her from his arms, accused him of crimes he hadn't committed, all because he didn't match their image of what a successful man should look like. Marcus closed the door gently and leaned against the wall. He thought about his own father, a factory worker who'd raised 3 kids on a salary that barely covered the bills. His father had worn the same work boots for 12 years, resoling them again and again because he couldn't afford new ones. He'd driven a truck that made Marcus's current vehicle look like a luxury car, and he'd worked himself into an early grave trying to give his children opportunities he'd never had. Marcus had sworn that his success wouldn't change who he was. He'd kept the truck because it reminded him of where he came from. He'd kept the humble clothes because they felt honest, authentic, real. He'd avoided the trappings of wealth because they felt like betrayals of everything his father had stood for. But tonight, those choices had been used against him. His humility had been weaponized into evidence of fraud. His simplicity had been twisted into proof of deception. And for what? Because Victoria Ashford couldn't imagine that a man in a hoodie might be worth more than her entire neighborhood combined? Because Reynolds and his guards had been trained to see threats in everyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of belonging? Marcus's phone buzzed again, even though it was supposed to be off. He glanced at the screen. It was Nia, using the emergency override. "Sir, I apologize for the intrusion, but there's something you need to see. Mrs. Ashford is giving an interview to Channel 7 right now. Put it on the main screen in the living room." Marcus walked downstairs and found the TV already on, the volume low. Victoria Ashford stood in front of the gates of his home, her composure mostly restored, her hair neatly fixed, her expression one of practiced concern. "I just want to make it clear that my actions tonight were motivated solely by concern for community safety," she was saying. "When a stranger approaches our gates in a vehicle that clearly doesn't belong in this neighborhood, it's natural to ask questions." The reporter nodded sympathetically. "Some people online are calling your actions discriminatory. How do you respond to that?" "I think discriminatory is a very strong word that gets thrown around too easily these days. I didn't see a man of any particular background tonight. I saw a potential threat." A man in a damaged vehicle, with a child in the back seat, claiming to own a mansion he couldn't possibly afford. Wouldn't you be concerned? And the security footage that's circulating? The footage showing you and the guards threatening the child? Victoria's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. "That footage has clearly been edited, manipulated by someone with a grudge. I've contacted my attorneys, and will be pursuing every legal avenue to expose the truth behind this orchestrated attack on my reputation." Marcus turned off the TV. She was lying. Boldly, shamelessly, on camera. And some people would believe her. They would believe her because they wanted to believe her. Because her version of events fit more comfortably into their worldview than the truth did. But she had made one critical mistake. She had assumed that Marcus Bennett was just some random man who got lucky. Someone without the resources or the will to fight back. She was wrong. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed a number from memory. The line clicked after 2 rings. "Marcus, it's 11 o'clock at night." "I know, David. I'm sorry, but I need a favor." David Morrison had been Marcus's first investor, back when the company was nothing but an idea and a prayer. He'd also been Sarah's godfather, the man who'd walked her down the aisle when her own father refused to attend the wedding. They hadn't spoken much in the past year. Marcus had pulled away from everyone after Sarah died, but some bonds didn't break that easily. "What's going on?" "Turn on Channel 7. There was a pause, then the sound of a TV coming to life in the background. Marcus waited. "Jesus Christ," David said finally. "Is that Victoria Ashford? The HOA dragon?" "She's calling me a fraud on live television." "I just saw the footage on Twitter. The whole internet's on your side, Marcus. This woman is destroying herself." "She's not destroying herself fast enough. She's controlling the narrative with the mainstream outlets. By morning, half the country will think I'm some kind of con artist who traumatized a nice white lady at his neighbor's gate." "What do you need?" Marcus looked out the window at the crowd, at the cameras, at the circus that had descended on his home. "I need people to know the truth. Not the viral clips, not the hot takes, the real story. My story, Sarah's story, Emma's story." "You want to go public? Really public?" "I don't want to, but she's forcing my hand. If I stay quiet, she wins. And I'm not going to let Emma grow up thinking her father ran away from a fight." David was quiet for a moment. "You know what this means, right? Once you open that door, You can't close it. Every detail of your life will be examined, questioned, dissected. Sarah's illness, Emma, everything. I know. And you're okay with that? Marcus thought about his daughter, asleep upstairs in the room her mother had designed. He thought about Sarah, who had spent her last months planning a future she would never see. And he thought about every person who had ever been judged unfairly, dismissed without a second glance, told they didn't belong somewhere they had every right to be. I'm not okay with it, he said, but I'm going to do it anyway, because staying silent isn't an option anymore. David sighed. All right, I'll make some calls. The Tribune owes me a favor, and I know a producer at NBC who's been dying for an exclusive with you for years. But Marcus? Yeah? Get some sleep first. You're going to need it. Marcus ended the call and set the phone down. Outside, the crowd was still growing. News vans lined the street. Helicopters circled overhead. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight, Marcus walked back upstairs, cracked open Emma's door one more time, and watched his daughter sleep. This was what he was fighting for. Not his reputation, not his pride, not even justice in the abstract. He was fighting for a little girl who had already lost her mother and deserved to know that her father would never let anyone take anything else from her. He closed the door and headed to his own room, the room Sarah had designed for them to share. The bed was too big for one person. It always had been, even in their old house. But Sarah had insisted on a king-size bed because she liked to sprawl, liked to stretch out her arms and legs in every direction while she slept. Marcus had spent countless nights pushed to the edge, barely holding on to his sliver of mattress while Sarah conquered the rest like a starfish. He would have given anything to be pushed to the edge again. Marcus lay down in the center of the bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come easy. It never did, not since Sarah died. But tomorrow was going to be a long day, and David was right. He needed rest. His phone sat dark and silent on the nightstand. Outside, the noise of the crowd continued, a distant murmur that would grow louder when the sun rose. But inside these walls, for now, there was peace. His daughter was safe. His home was secure. And whatever came next, Marcus Bennett would face it the same way he'd faced everything else in his life. Quietly, steadily, and with the strength that love provides. Morning came too fast. Marcus woke to the sound of helicopters overhead and Emma's small hand shaking his shoulder.
Daddy, there are people outside. Lots of people.
He sat up, disoriented for a moment, then remembered everything. The gates, the guards, Victoria Ashford's face twisted with fury, the crowd that had gathered like vultures around fresh meat. How many people, sweetheart?
I can't count that high.
Marcus walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Emma hadn't been exaggerating. The street in front of the estate was packed. News vans, satellite trucks, reporters with microphones, photographers with long lenses, and what looked like hundreds of ordinary people with phones raised and recording. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. David Morrison. You see this? David's voice was tight. I see it. It's on every channel. CNN, Fox, MSN, BC. They're all running the story. The footage from last night has over 20 million views now. 20 million. Marcus let that number sink in. What's the angle they're pushing? Mixed. Some outlets are framing it as a clear case of discrimination. Others are running with Victoria's narrative. Mysterious tech millionaire with questionable background, possible fraud. She's been busy, Marcus. She hired a crisis PR firm overnight. Of course she did. They're already seeding stories about you. Unnamed sources questioning how you made your money,
implying there might be something shady in your past.
There's nothing shady in my past. I know that. You know that. But in the court of public opinion, rumors don't need to be true. They just need to be loud. Marcus rubbed his eyes. He'd gotten maybe 3 hours of sleep. Not enough to deal with this. Not nearly enough. What time is the Tribune interview? 2 o'clock. NBC wants you at 4. And I've got calls from the Washington Post, the New York Times, and about 40 other outlets I haven't had time to sort through yet.
Daddy?
Emma tugged at his shirt.
Can I have breakfast?
Marcus looked at his daughter, at her innocent face unmarked by any understanding of what was happening outside these walls. She didn't know that millions of people were watching, waiting, judging. She just knew she was hungry. David, I'll call you back. He ended the call and knelt down to Emma's level. What do you want for breakfast, princess?
Pancakes, with the faces.
Smiley face pancakes? Emma nodded enthusiastically.
Then smiley face pancakes it is.
They walked downstairs together, Emma chattering about her new room, about the fairy lights, about how she'd dreamed that her mother came to visit and told her she loved the purple curtains. Marcus listened and nodded and made the appropriate sounds of engagement, but part of his mind was already racing ahead to the battles that waited. He made pancakes. Not perfectly, he'd never been as good at this as Sarah, but Emma didn't seem to mind. She drowned them in syrup and ate with the unself-conscious joy that only children possess.
Daddy, why are all those people outside?
Marcus paused with his coffee halfway to his lips. He'd known this question was coming, but he still wasn't ready for it. They want to talk to me about what happened last night.
Because of the mean lady?
Yes.
Are you going to talk to them?
Some of them, later today. Emma chewed thoughtfully, syrup glistening on her chin. What are you going to say? I'm going to tell them the truth. The truth about what? About who we are. About why we're here. About Mommy. Emma's eyes widened. You're going to tell them about Mommy? If that's okay with you. She considered this for a long moment, her small face serious in a way that made her look heartbreakingly like Sarah.
I think Mommy would want people to know she was nice.
She was more than nice, sweetheart. She was amazing.
Then tell them that.
Marcus reached across the table and wiped the syrup from Emma's chin. I will. After breakfast, he called the nanny service he'd arranged weeks ago. A woman named Patricia arrived within the hour. Mid-50s, warm eyes, excellent references. She would stay with Emma while Marcus dealt with everything outside. Mr. Bennett, I want you to know that I've seen the footage, Patricia said quietly, while Emma played in the living room. What those people did to you, to your daughter, it was wrong. I'm honored to help however I can. Thank you, Patricia. That means more than you know. Your little girl is beautiful. She has her father's strength. Marcus shook his head. She has her mother's. I'm just trying to keep up. At noon, Nia called with an update. Sir, the situation outside has evolved. Victoria Ashford is holding a press conference at 1 o'clock. She's gathered several neighbors who are prepared to give statements supporting her version of events. How many neighbors? 6 confirmed, all members of the HOA board. Of course they are. There's more. The terminated security guards have retained an attorney. They're filing a wrongful termination suit this afternoon. Marcus had expected this. What grounds? They're claiming you used manipulated footage to justify their firing, that the security system was hacked to display false ownership information. That's absurd. The system is unhackable. We know that, but their attorney is pushing the narrative hard. He's been on 3 morning shows already, calling you a dangerous con man who threatened his clients. Marcus walked to the window again. The crowd had grown even larger. Signs had appeared, some supporting him, others calling him a fraud. This was how it worked in America now. Everything became a battle, a tribal division, a choice between sides. Nia, I need you to prepare something for me. Of course, sir. The complete file on every incident at those gates over the past 5 years. Every time someone was stopped, questioned, or detained by security. I want names, dates, photos if we have them. Sir, that's a substantial amount of data. I know, but if Victoria wants to make this about one night, I'm going to show the pattern. This didn't start with me, and it won't end with me unless we expose the whole truth. Understood. I'll have it ready within 2 hours. At 1 o'clock, Marcus watched Victoria Ashford's press conference on the television in his study. She stood at a podium that had been set up in front of the community center, surrounded by neighbors in expensive clothes and practiced expressions of concern. I want to begin by saying that my heart goes out to anyone who has experienced genuine discrimination, Victoria said, her voice smooth and rehearsed. But what happened last night was not discrimination. It was a concerned community responding to a legitimate security threat. A reporter raised her hand. Mrs. Ashford, the footage clearly shows you making derogatory comments about Mr. Bennett's appearance and vehicle. That footage has been selectively edited to create a false narrative. I made no such comments. I simply asked reasonable questions about a stranger approaching our gates. And the child? The footage shows guards threatening to call CPS. Victoria's smile tightened. The guards were following protocol. When a child appears to be in a potentially dangerous situation, it's appropriate to contact the authorities. We were thinking of the girl's safety. Marcus muted the television. He'd heard enough. His phone buzzed with a text from David. You watching this? Unfortunately. She's good. I'll give her that. She's a liar. Same thing in this business. You ready for 2 o'clock? As ready as I'll ever be. The Tribune reporter arrived at 1:45. A woman named Jennifer Walsh, mid-30s, sharp eyes behind stylish glasses. She'd won a Pulitzer 2 years ago for a series on housing discrimination, and David had specifically requested her. Mr. Bennett, thank you for agreeing to speak with me. Thank you for coming. They sat in the living room, cameras and lights arranged by Jennifer's crew. Marcus had changed into a simple button-down shirt, nicer than his hoodie, but not ostentatious. He wanted people to see him as he was, not as some tech billionaire playing dress-up. Before we begin, Jennifer said, I want you to know that I've reviewed all available footage, including the unedited versions your team provided. I'm going to ask you difficult questions, but I'm not here to ambush you. I appreciate that. Let's start with the basics. Can you tell me, in your own words, what happened last night? Marcus took a breath. I was bringing my daughter home for the first time. We'd purchased the property 6 months ago, but with everything involved in finalizing the sale and preparing the house, we hadn't actually moved in yet. Last night was supposed to be special, our first night in our new home. And what happened when you arrived? We were stopped at the gate by security guards. They assumed I was making a delivery or had gotten lost. When I explained that I was the owner, they laughed. They laughed? Openly. They looked at my truck, at my clothes, at me, and they decided I couldn't possibly belong. Within minutes, they were threatening to detain me for trespassing. And when Mrs. Ashford arrived, things escalated further. How so? She accused me of being a con artist, a fraud. She suggested that my daughter might have been kidnapped and demanded that the guards call Child Protective Services. Jennifer leaned forward. Let's talk about that moment. You're a father, standing at the gates of your own home, and someone is threatening to take your daughter. What was going through your mind? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I've been underestimated my whole life. I've been dismissed, overlooked, assumed to be less than I am. I learned a long time ago that getting angry doesn't help. It just gives people an excuse to dismiss you further. So what did you do? I stayed calm. I waited, because I knew the truth would come out eventually. And it did. The security system identified you as the owner. It did, and even then, they didn't believe it. Mrs. Ashford called it a glitch. The guard suggested I had hacked the system. They couldn't accept that their assumptions were wrong, so they invented explanations that protected their worldview. Jennifer glanced at her notes.
Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Ashford is claiming that the footage has been manipulated, that you somehow altered the security recordings to frame her.
The footage is unedited, time-stamped, verified by multiple independent cybersecurity experts. I didn't manipulate anything. I didn't need to. The truth speaks for itself.
She's also implying that there are questions about how you acquired your wealth, that perhaps your background isn't as clean as you claim.
Marcus met Jennifer's eyes directly. I built my company from nothing. I started it in my wife's hospital room while she was dying of cancer. I worked 18-hour days for years, building something that would provide security for my daughter after I lost my wife. Every dollar I've earned, I earned legally, ethically, and transparently.
Your wife passed away 2 years ago. Can you tell me about her?
This was the part Marcus had been dreading. He'd protected Sarah's memory fiercely, kept her out of the public eye, even when doing so meant sacrificing press opportunities that could have helped his business. But now, there was no other way. Her name was Sarah. She was a graphic designer. We met in college, got married at 23, had Emma when we were 28. When Emma was 3, Sarah was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. She fought for 18 months. She fought harder than anyone I've ever known.
And during that time, you were building your company?
I was doing whatever I had to do to survive. Sarah's treatments were expensive. Our insurance only covered so much. I needed income, but I also needed to be with her, to take care of Emma. So I built a business that could operate from anywhere. Hospital rooms, waiting rooms, our bedroom when she was too weak to get out of bed. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was the hardest time of my life. But Sarah, she was the one who kept me going. Even when she was at her weakest, she was planning for our future, for Emma's future. She designed this house, Jennifer. Every room, every color, every detail. She knew she wouldn't live to see it built, but she wanted Emma to grow up in a place that her mother had created. Jennifer's expression softened. And last night, you were bringing Emma to that house for the first time. Yes, it was supposed to be a celebration, a new beginning. Instead, my daughter watched strangers threaten to take her away from me. She heard people say that her father didn't belong, that he was a criminal, that he had stolen her. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. She's 6 years old. She's already lost her mother. And last night, a group of people tried to convince her that she might lose her father too. The interview continued for another hour. Jennifer asked about the security system, about his company, about his plans going forward. Marcus answered everything honestly, directly, without evasion. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, Jennifer shook his hand. Mr. Bennett, I've interviewed a lot of people in my career. Politicians, CEOs, celebrities. Most of them are performing, even when they think they're being authentic. You weren't performing. I don't know how to perform. I just know how to tell the truth. That's rarer than you think. Jennifer packed up her notes. This story is going to get bigger before it gets smaller. Are you prepared for that? I don't have a choice. No, I suppose you don't. After Jennifer left, Marcus checked on Emma. She was in her room with Patricia, drawing pictures with crayons.
Daddy, look what I made!
She held up a drawing, stick figures, crudely rendered but recognizable. A tall figure with brown hair, a small figure with yellow hair, and above them, floating in the sky, another figure surrounded by stars.
That's me and you and Mommy,
Emma explained.
Mommy's watching us from heaven.
Marcus felt his eyes sting. It's beautiful, sweetheart.
Patricia said I'm a good artist.
You're the best artist I know.
Better than Mommy? Marcus knelt down and hugged his daughter. Nobody was better than Mommy, but you're getting close. At 4 o'clock, the NBC crew arrived. This interview was longer, more intense. The questions were harder, more aggressive at times. But Marcus held his ground. By evening, both interviews had aired. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded. The clip of Marcus talking about Sarah, about building his company in her hospital room, about the house she'd designed for their daughter. It went viral within hours.
People who had been skeptical began changing their minds. The narrative was shifting. But not everyone was convinced. At 8 o'clock, Marcus received a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Bennett? This is Thomas Reynolds." Marcus went still. The head guard. The one who had laughed in his face. "What do you want?" "I want to talk. In person. Tonight." "Why would I agree to that?" There was a long pause. "Because I have information about Victoria Ashford that you need to hear. Information that could change everything." "What kind of information?" "Not over the phone. Meet me at the coffee shop on Maple Street in an hour. Come alone." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone. This could be a trap. Reynolds had every reason to want revenge. But there was something in his voice, a desperation that didn't sound like anger. He made a decision. "Patricia, can you stay late tonight? There's something I need to do." An hour later, Marcus walked into the coffee shop on Maple Street. It was nearly empty, just a bored barista and an elderly couple in the corner. Reynolds sat at a table near the back, his hands wrapped around a cup he wasn't drinking. He looked different than he had the night before. Smaller. Defeated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "Thank you for coming," Reynolds said. Marcus sat across from him, but didn't respond. "I know you have no reason to trust me. After what happened, after what I did, you should hate me." "I don't hate you. I don't know you well enough to hate you." Reynolds flinched. "That's almost worse." "What do you want, Reynolds?" The former guard took a deep breath. "I want to tell you the truth. About Victoria Ashford. About what's really been going on in that neighborhood for the past 5 years." "I'm listening." Reynolds looked around, making sure no one was close enough to hear. "It wasn't just you. You weren't the first person we stopped at those gates. For looking like you didn't belong. There have been dozens, maybe hundreds. I suspected as much. But it goes deeper than that. Victoria, she has a system. Anyone who moves into the neighborhood who she doesn't approve of, anyone who doesn't fit her image of what the community should look like, she finds ways to push them out. Code violations that don't exist. HOA fines for imaginary infractions. Complaints to the city about everything from trash cans to paint colors." "And you helped her do this?" Reynolds nodded slowly. "I did. We all did. She paid us extra, cash, off the books, to make life difficult for certain people. To stop them at the gates, to question them repeatedly, to make them feel unwelcome until they gave up and left." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I saw your interview. I saw you talking about your wife, about your daughter. And I realized..." Reynolds's voice broke. "I have a daughter too. She's 8. And I thought about someone treating her the way I treated your little girl last night. And I couldn't live with myself." Marcus studied the man across from him. 24 hours ago, this same man had laughed in his face, threatened to handcuff him, suggested that his daughter might be stolen. Now he sat here, broken and confessing, seeking something that looked like absolution. "What do you want from me, Reynolds?" "I don't want anything. I'm going to lose my job anyway.
I've already lost it. My wife's going to leave me when this all comes out. I'm done. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive. But I can give you this. What is it? Everything. 5 years of records. Emails between Victoria and the security team. Spreadsheets tracking which residents she wanted us to target. Audio recordings of her giving us instructions. Marcus looked at the USB drive, but didn't touch it. Why would you record your own boss? Insurance.
In case things ever went south and she tried to blame us for everything. Reynolds laughed bitterly. Turns out I was right to be paranoid. She's already throwing us under the bus, saying we acted alone, that she had no idea what we were doing. And this proves otherwise? This proves that every single thing that happened last night, and every single thing that's happened in that neighborhood for the past 5 years, was orchestrated by Victoria Ashford. She's not a concerned citizen. She's a predator who's been using us as her weapons. Marcus finally picked up the USB drive. It felt heavier than it should have. If I use this, it will destroy her. I know. It might destroy you, too. Reynolds nodded. I know that, too. But my daughter, she's going to grow up hearing about what her father did. I can't change that. But maybe, if I help expose the truth, she'll know that I tried to make it right in the end. Maybe that counts for something. Marcus pocketed the USB drive and stood. It counts. It's not enough. It might never be enough. But it counts. Mr. Bennett? Marcus stopped. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, truly sorry. For everything. Marcus looked at the man who had threatened his family just 24 hours ago. He thought about forgiveness, about grace, about the complicated mess of human nature that allowed people to do terrible things and still feel remorse afterward. Thank you for the apology, he said finally. I'm not ready to accept it yet, but thank you. He walked out of the coffee shop and into the night, the USB drive burning in his pocket like a promise. Victoria Ashford had started this war. She had looked at Marcus Bennett and seen someone she could dismiss, destroy, and forget. But Marcus Bennett had been underestimated his whole life, and he was just getting started. Marcus drove home with the USB drive pressed against his thigh, his mind racing through possibilities. Reynolds had just handed him a weapon, but weapons could misfire. They could be turned against the person holding them. Before he did anything with this information, he needed to verify every single byte of data. Emma was already asleep when he got back. Patricia met him at the door, concern written across her face. Is everything all right, Mr. Bennett? You look like you've seen a ghost. Not a ghost. Something worse. He paused. Thank you for staying late. I don't know what I would have done without you today. That little girl is a treasure. Taking care of her isn't work. It's a privilege. After Patricia left, Marcus went straight to his study and plugged the USB drive into a secure laptop. He'd built his career on cybersecurity, on protecting data and exposing vulnerabilities. Now he would use those same skills to examine what Reynolds had given him. The files were organized meticulously. Clearly the work of someone who understood that evidence needed to be clear, dated, and attributable. There were folders for each year, going back 5 years. Inside each folder were subfolders: emails, audio recordings, spreadsheets, photographs. Marcus started with the emails. The first one was dated 3 years ago, from Victoria Ashford to Reynolds. The new family on Oakwood Drive is becoming a problem. They've been parking a work van in their driveway. Find reasons to cite them. Make it uncomfortable. The response from Reynolds? Understood. We'll increase patrols and document any violations. Marcus scrolled through dozens more. Families targeted for having too many cars. A retired teacher harassed for her garden decorations.
A young couple who received noise complaints despite being quieter than their neighbors. And through it all, the common thread was clear. Victoria Ashford was systematically targeting anyone who didn't meet her standards of what a proper resident should look like. Then Marcus found the audio recordings. He put on headphones and pressed play on the first file. Victoria's voice came through, crisp and commanding. "Reynolds, there's a black family looking at the house on Elm Street. I need you to make sure they don't feel welcome if they move in." Reynolds' voice, hesitant. "Ma'am, I'm not sure." "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I'm asking you to do your job. Patrol that area more frequently. Stop them at the gate every single time they come through. Check their IDs repeatedly. Make it clear that certain people don't belong here." Marcus stopped the recording. His hands were shaking. He'd suspected that what happened to him wasn't isolated. He'd known, on some level, that Victoria Ashford's behavior had a pattern. But hearing it laid out so explicitly, so casually, so matter-of-factly, it turned his stomach. He kept listening. There were recordings of Victoria instructing guards to target a Hispanic family with 3 children, an Asian couple who had moved in from California, a single mother who worked 2 jobs and drove an older car, and now, apparently, a single white father in a rusty truck who didn't dress like a millionaire. Victoria Ashford wasn't just prejudiced. She was systematic. She had turned her prejudice into policy, her hatred into process. Marcus worked through the night, cataloging everything. By dawn, he had compiled a comprehensive timeline of Victoria's activities, cross-referenced with HOA records, property sales data, and demographic information. The pattern was undeniable. Over the past 5 years, at least 14 families had been driven out of the neighborhood through harassment campaigns orchestrated by Victoria Ashford. At 7 in the morning, his phone rang. David Morrison. "Marcus, have you slept at all?" "No." "That's what I figured. Listen, I've been fielding calls all night. The story is exploding. Your interviews are everywhere. But Victoria's fighting back hard. She's got lawyers threatening defamation suits against anyone who runs negative coverage. She can threaten all she wants. I have proof." "What kind of proof?" Marcus looked at the laptop screen, at the thousands of files that documented 5 years of systematic discrimination. The kind that ends careers. The kind that might end her in prison. David was silent for a moment. "Where did you get this?" "Reynolds, the head guard. He came to me last night." "Reynolds? The guy who tried to handcuff you?" People are complicated, David. Sometimes the same person can be both the villain and the witness. "What are you going to do with it?" Marcus had been asking himself the same question for hours. He could release it to the press, let journalists tear Victoria apart. He could hand it to the police, let the legal system handle it. Or he could confront Victoria directly, give her a chance to see exactly what she was facing before the walls closed in. "I'm going to do what Sarah would have done," Marcus said finally. "I'm going to give her a choice." "A choice?" "To surrender or to fight. But either way, the truth comes out." At 9 o'clock, Marcus called Victoria Ashford's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Mr. Bennett, I'm surprised you have the nerve to call me directly." "We need to talk, Mrs. Ashford. In person." "I have nothing to say to you that my lawyers can't say better." "I think you'll want to hear what I have before you make that decision." There was a long pause. "Is this a threat?" "It's an opportunity. 1 hour. Your house or mine." Another pause. Longer this time. "My house. 11 o'clock. Come alone." "I wouldn't have it any other way." Marcus checked on Emma before he left.
She was eating breakfast with Patricia, chattering happily about a dream she'd had.
Daddy, Patricia made waffles.
I see that. Are they good?
The best.
Emma held up a piece dripping with syrup. Where are you going?
I have to talk to someone about grown-up things, but I'll be back soon.
Is it the mean lady? Marcus hesitated. Emma was too perceptive for her own good sometimes. Yes, sweetheart. It's the mean lady.
Are you going to make her say sorry?
I'm going to try. Emma nodded seriously.
Good. She was really mean. She should say sorry.
Marcus kissed her forehead. I love you, princess.
I love you too, Daddy. Be careful with the mean lady. She has angry eyes.
Marcus smiled despite himself. I noticed that too. Victoria Ashford's house was 3 streets over from Marcus's. Smaller, older, but impeccably maintained. Every shrub was trimmed to geometric perfection. Every flower bed was arranged with military precision.
Even the welcome mat looked like it had been measured for exact placement. Victoria answered the door herself. She was dressed in a cream-colored suit, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. But there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Mr. Bennet. Mrs. Ashford. Come in, and don't touch anything. The inside of the house matched the outside. Pristine, controlled, devoid of warmth. Marcus followed Victoria into a sitting room, where 2 chairs faced each other like opponents in a duel. Sit, Victoria said. It wasn't an invitation. Marcus sat. Victoria remained standing, arms crossed, eyes cold. You have 5 minutes. Say what you came to say. Marcus pulled out his phone and set it on the table between them. I'm going to play something for you. I want you to listen carefully. He pressed play. Victoria's own voice filled the room. Reynolds, there's a black family looking at the house on Elm Street. I need you to make sure they don't feel welcome if they move in. Victoria's face went white. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I'm asking you to do your job. Patrol that area more frequently. Stop them at the gate every single time they come through. Check their IDs repeatedly. Make it clear that certain people don't belong here. Marcus stopped the recording. Victoria hadn't moved, but her hands were trembling. How did you? Reynolds gave it to me, along with 5 years of emails, spreadsheets, and documentation. Marcus leaned forward. 14 families, Mrs. Ashford. 14 families that you drove out of this neighborhood because they didn't meet your standards. That recording was made without my consent. It's inadmissible. Maybe in court, but not in the court of public opinion, and not in front of a grand jury investigating civil rights violations. Victoria finally sat down. Her composure was cracking, but she was fighting hard to hold it together. What do you want? I want to understand. I want to know why a woman with every advantage in life would spend 5 years terrorizing people who never did anything to her. You wouldn't understand. Try me. Victoria was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, stripped of its usual venom. I grew up poor, Mr. Bennet. Really poor. The kind of poor where you wear the same clothes to school every day and pretend you're not hungry because you're too ashamed to admit you didn't eat breakfast. I swore that when I made something of myself, I would never go back to that. I would never let anything threaten what I built. And so you decided to threaten everyone else instead? I decided to protect my community, to maintain standards, to make sure that the neighborhood I moved into didn't become the neighborhood I moved out of. By driving out families who looked like the family you used to be? Victoria's eyes flashed. By keeping out people who don't invest in their properties, who don't maintain standards, who bring down values. You don't know anything about those families. You don't know how hard they worked, what they sacrificed, what they overcame to get here. You just looked at them and decided they didn't belong. And I was right. Look at what happened when you showed up. Chaos, media circuses, police. My neighborhood turned into a spectacle. Your neighborhood turned into a spectacle because you turned it into one. I just wanted to take my daughter home. Victoria stood abruptly, pacing toward the window. You have no idea what it's like to fight for everything you have, to claw your way up from nothing, only to watch it slip away because people who don't appreciate what they have move in and destroy it. You're wrong. I know exactly what that's like. I built my company while my wife was dying. I worked 20-hour days while changing diapers and sitting in hospital waiting rooms. I know what it means to fight for something. But I never let that fight turn me into someone who hurts innocent people. Victoria turned back to face him. So what happens now? You expose me? Destroy everything I've built? That's not my decision to make. It's yours. What do you mean? Marcus stood and walked toward her. I'm giving you a choice, Mrs. Ashford. The same choice you never gave anyone else. What choice? You can fight this. You can hire more lawyers, spin more stories, try to convince the world that I'm the villain and you're the victim. And I will release everything I have, every email, every recording, every piece of evidence, and I will let the public and the legal system decide what happens to you. Victoria's jaw tightened. Or you can take responsibility. You can resign from the HOA board. You can issue a public apology to every family you harassed. You can cooperate with any investigation that follows, and you can spend the rest of your life trying to become the person you should have been all along. You're asking me to destroy myself. I'm asking you to choose between destruction with dignity and destruction without it. Either way, Mrs. Ashford, your reign over this neighborhood is over. Victoria stared at him for a long moment. Marcus could see the calculations happening behind her eyes, the weighing of options, the assessment of escape routes, the desperate search for leverage that no longer existed. You think you're better than me, she said finally. You think because you have money and a sad story and a cute daughter, that makes you morally superior. I don't think I'm better than you. I think I made different choices. And I think those choices matter. I made choices too. Hard choices. Choices that kept this neighborhood safe and valuable for 20 years. Safe for who? Valuable for who? Marcus shook his head. You built a prison and called it a paradise. And then you punished anyone who didn't fit your definition of a worthy inmate. Victoria's composure finally broke. Her voice cracked as she spoke. I was trying to protect something. Doesn't that count for anything? It might have, if you'd been protecting people instead of protecting your idea of what people should be. The room fell silent. Victoria sank back into her chair, her perfect posture collapsing into something smaller, older, more human. 48 hours, Marcus said. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, I release everything. He walked toward the door, then stopped. Mrs. Ashford? She looked up, her eyes wet with tears she was desperately trying to hold back. My daughter asked me to make you say sorry. She said you have angry eyes. Marcus paused. I think she was wrong. I think you have scared eyes. And I think you've been scared for so long that you forgot there was any other way to live. He walked out of the house and didn't look back. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Marcus's mind was heavy with everything he'd seen and heard. Victoria Ashford wasn't a monster, not in the simple way that stories like to portray monsters.
She was a broken person who had let her brokenness break others. That didn't excuse what she'd done, but it made it harder to hate her. When he got home, Emma was waiting by the door.
Daddy, you're back!
Marcus scooped her up and held her close. I told you I'd be back soon.
Did the mean lady say sorry?
Not yet, sweetheart, but I think she might.
That's good.
Emma wrapped her arms around his neck.
Because being mean is bad, but saying sorry is good. That's what Mommy used to say.
Your mommy was very wise.
I know. That's why I listen to her, even though she's in heaven.
Marcus carried Emma into the living room and sat down with her on his lap. Patricia had left, and the house was quiet.
Through the windows, he could see that the crowd at the gates had thinned considerably. Most of the media had moved on to other stories, leaving only a few persistent stragglers.
Daddy?
Yes, sweetheart.
Are we going to stay in this house forever?
Marcus thought about the question. 24 hours ago, he wouldn't have been able to answer it. The gates, the guards, the accusations, all of it had made him question whether this place could ever truly be home. But now, looking at his daughter's face, at the eyes that were so much like Sarah's, he knew the answer. Yes, baby, we're going to stay here forever. This is our home.
Good, because I like my purple room, and Mommy made it special for me.
She did. She made everything special for you. That night, Marcus sat in his study long after Emma had gone to bed.
His phone kept buzzing with calls and messages, reporters wanting updates, David with strategy suggestions, even a few celebrities who had seen the viral footage and wanted to express support. But Marcus ignored all of it. He was thinking about Victoria's face when she heard her own voice on that recording. He was thinking about the fear he'd seen there. Not fear of consequences, but something deeper. Fear of being seen. Fear of having the mask stripped away. At midnight, his phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. I've made my decision. Press conference tomorrow at noon. I'll do what you asked. All of it. But I need you to know something first. Marcus waited. Another message appeared. I'm sorry. Not because you have evidence. Not because I'm scared. I'm sorry because you were right. I forgot there was another way to live. Maybe it's too late for me, but maybe admitting that is the first step. Marcus read the message 3 times. He thought about responding, but what was there to say? Victoria Ashford was about to face the consequences of her choices. Whether she emerged from that process as a better person or a broken one was up to her. He set the phone down and walked to Emma's room. She was asleep, her teddy bear clutched to her chest, the fairy lights casting soft shadows on the purple curtains. Sarah had planned all of this. She'd known she wouldn't be here to see it, but she'd built it anyway. A sanctuary for their daughter, a place where Emma would always feel safe and loved. And now, finally, that sanctuary was complete. Not because the house was finished, but because the threats against it had been neutralized. Victoria Ashford would confess. The guards had already been dealt with, and the neighborhood that had tried to exclude them would have to reckon with its own complicity. Marcus leaned down and kissed Emma's forehead. "We did it, sweetheart," he whispered. "We're home." He walked back to his own room, to the bed that was still too big for one person. But tonight, as he lay down in the center and stared at the ceiling, something felt different. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus Bennett didn't feel alone. Sarah was there. In the walls she'd designed, in the colors she'd chosen, in the daughter she'd left behind, and in the strength she'd taught him to find in himself. Tomorrow, Victoria Ashford would face the world. Tomorrow, the story would enter a new chapter. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight,
Marcus closed his eyes and slept. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he didn't dream of loss. He dreamed of home. The morning arrived gray and heavy, clouds pressing down on the neighborhood like a held breath. Marcus woke before Emma, as he always did, and stood at the window watching the last of the news vans pack up and leave. The circus was moving on, but the real performance hadn't happened yet.
At 11 o'clock, his phone buzzed. David Morrison. "You watching the news?" "Not yet." "Turn it on. Victoria's getting ready. Every major network is carrying it live." Marcus walked to the living room and switched on the television. The screen filled with an image of the community center, the same podium where Victoria had defended herself just 2 days ago. But the crowd was different now. Smaller. Quieter. The neighbors who had stood beside her before were conspicuously absent.
Daddy, what are you watching?
Emma had appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, her teddy bear dangling from one hand.
Remember the mean lady? The one with angry eyes?
Scared eyes. Remember I told you she might say sorry? Emma nodded. She's about to try. Emma climbed onto the couch beside him, tucking herself under his arm. Together, they watched as Victoria Ashford walked to the podium. She looked different than she had in every previous appearance. No perfect hair, no flawless makeup, no armor of expensive clothes. She wore a simple gray dress, and her face was bare and pale. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but stripped of its usual steel. "Thank you all for coming. I know many of you expected a different kind of statement today. I know many of you expected me to defend myself, to fight back, to maintain my innocence." She paused, taking a breath that seemed to cost her everything. "I'm not going to do that. I'm here to tell the truth." The reporters stirred. Cameras flashed. Victoria gripped the podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "For the past 5 years, I've used my position as HOA president to systematically harass and discriminate against residents who I believe did not belong in this community. I instructed security personnel to target specific families based on their appearance, their vehicles, their backgrounds. I created a hostile environment designed to force them to leave." The murmurs grew louder. Victoria pressed on. "2 nights ago, I confronted Marcus Bennett at the gates of his own home. I accused him of being a fraud, a con artist, a criminal. I called for his daughter to be taken from him. I did these things because he didn't look like what I thought a wealthy homeowner should look like." Victoria's voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "I was wrong. I was cruel. I was everything I thought I was protecting this community against." She looked directly into the camera. "To Mr. Bennett and his daughter Emma, I am deeply, profoundly sorry. What I did to you was inexcusable. What I did to all the families I drove away was inexcusable." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Effective immediately, I am resigning from the HOA board. I am also cooperating fully with any investigations into my conduct. The evidence against me is comprehensive and damning, and I will not insult anyone's intelligence by pretending otherwise." Victoria set the paper down on the podium. Her resignation letter, Marcus realized. "I grew up poor. I spent my whole life running from that poverty, terrified that it would catch up to me, that everything I built would be taken away. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that the only way to stay safe was to keep out anyone who reminded me of where I came from." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I became the monster I was afraid of. I became the person who judges others for what they look like instead of who they are. I became the thing that hurt me most when I was young." She looked up again. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope that my confession
can be the beginning of healing for this community. And I hope that the families I hurt know that their pain was real, their experiences were valid, and they deserved so much better than what I gave them. Victoria stepped back from the podium. For a moment, she just stood there, small and broken, under the weight of her own words. Then she turned and walked away, ignoring the shouted questions from reporters, disappearing into the community center as cameras flashed behind her. The television cut to a news anchor, but Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at Emma, who was staring at the screen with a confused expression.
Daddy, was that the mean lady?
Yes, sweetheart.
She said sorry.
She did.
But she still looked sad.
Marcus pulled Emma closer. Sometimes saying sorry doesn't make the sadness go away. Sometimes it's just the beginning.
The beginning of what?
The beginning of becoming a better person. It takes a long time, and it's really hard. But if she keeps trying, maybe she'll get there someday. Emma thought about this for a moment.
Do you forgive her, Daddy?
Marcus considered the question carefully. He thought about the night at the gates, about Emma's terrified screams, about the guards reaching for handcuffs, about Victoria's voice dripping with contempt. He thought about all the families who had been driven away, all the damage that could never be fully repaired. I'm not sure yet, sweetheart. Forgiveness takes time, too.
That's okay.
Emma patted his arm with her small hand.
Mommy always said you were the best at taking your time.
Marcus laughed despite himself. Did she?
She said you think about everything really careful. She said that's why you make good choices.
Well, I try.
You don't just try, Daddy. You do.
Emma smiled up at him with Sarah's eyes.
That's what Mommy said.
The phone call started immediately after Victoria's press conference. David Morrison with congratulations. Jennifer Walsh requesting a follow-up interview. The mayor's office expressing support. Various corporations offering partnership opportunities that Marcus had no interest in pursuing. But one call stood out. Mr. Bennett, this is Thomas Reynolds. Marcus had been expecting this. I saw the press conference. I wanted to thank you for not releasing the recordings before she had a chance to do this herself. It wasn't about protecting her. It was about giving her a choice. I know. That's why I'm calling. Reynolds paused. I'm going to turn myself in tomorrow. Cooperate with investigators. Tell them everything I know about the operations here. You don't have to do that. The evidence speaks for itself. I have to do it for myself. For my daughter. She's old enough to understand what happened, and I need her to see that her father takes responsibility for his mistakes. Marcus thought about Emma, about all the lessons Sarah had tried to instill before she died, about the kind of man he wanted his daughter to see when she looked at him. That takes courage, Reynolds. It takes desperation, but maybe that's where courage starts sometimes. Reynolds' voice was heavy. Mr. Bennett, I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but if you could, if there's ever a chance, could you tell your daughter that I'm sorry? Really sorry. Not just for what I did, but for what she saw, for how scared she must have been. Marcus looked at Emma, who had returned to her room to get dressed, her small footsteps echoing through the house that Sarah had designed. I'll tell her. But you should know something, Reynolds. What's that? My daughter is 6 years old. She's already lost her mother. She's already seen more pain than any child should see. But when I asked her about you and the other guards, do you know what she said? What? She said you were confused. She said sometimes people do mean things when they're confused, and the best thing to do is help them understand better. Marcus paused. She didn't hate you, Reynolds. She felt sorry for you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Reynolds spoke again, his voice was thick. You're raising one hell of a kid, Mr. Bennett. Her mother did most of the work.
I'm just trying not to mess it up." The days that followed brought a kind of peace Marcus hadn't expected. The media moved on to other stories. The neighborhood settled into an uneasy quiet. And the Bennett household began the slow process of actually becoming a home. Emma started school at the elementary, 2 blocks away. Marcus had worried about how she'd be received, the daughter of the man at the center of a national controversy. But children were resilient in ways adults often forgot. Within a week, she had 3 best friends and had been invited to 2 birthday parties.
"Daddy, can I have a sleepover?"
"Already? You've only been in school for 10 days. Madison says sleepovers are the best. Her mom makes pancakes with chocolate chips."
"I make pancakes."
"Yeah, but yours have faces. That's for babies."
"I thought you liked the faces."
Emma paused, considering.
"I like the faces when it's just us. But for sleepovers, chocolate chips are cooler."
Marcus smiled. "Fine, chocolate chip pancakes. But you have to help me make them."
"Deal."
The neighbors began reaching out too, tentatively at first, as if approaching a wild animal. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman from across the street who had spoken up during the confrontation, was the first to knock on the door.
"Mr. Bennett, I wanted to apologize."
"For what? You defended me."
"I should have done more. I should have spoken up years ago, when Victoria first started her campaigns."
"I saw what she was doing, and I stayed silent, because I didn't want trouble."
Mrs. Chen's eyes were wet. "My husband and I came to this country 50 years ago. We faced discrimination that would curl your hair, and I swore I would never let it happen to anyone else if I could stop it. But when the time came, I was a coward." "You weren't a coward. You were surviving. There's a difference." "Is there?" Marcus thought about all the times he'd stayed quiet when he should have spoken up. All the moments when silence seemed safer than confrontation. He understood Mrs. Chen's guilt because he'd felt versions of it himself. There is. And the fact that you're here now, talking about it, that counts for something. Mrs. Chen reached out and took his hand. "Your wife designed this house, didn't she?" "How did you know?" "I saw the plans when they were filed with the city."
The architect's notes said the client had a very specific vision, every detail, every color, every piece of landscaping. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years, Mr. Bennett. I've seen a lot of houses go up, but I've never seen one designed with that much love."
Marcus felt his throat tighten. She wanted Emma to have something permanent, something that would last even after she was gone.
"She succeeded."
Mrs. Chen squeezed his hand.
"And so did you."
2 weeks after Victoria's press conference, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Reynolds showed up at the gate, requesting entry through the intercom system.
"I know I have no right to be here, but there's something I need to give you, in person." Marcus hesitated, then opened the gate. Reynolds looked different than he had during their coffee shop meeting. Smaller still, but somehow lighter too, as if the weight of his secrets had been pressing down on him physically, and confession had released some of that burden.
He held out a manila envelope.
"What's this?"
"Letters, from the families Victoria drove out. I tracked down as many as I could, 11 out of 14. I told them what happened, what I did, what you did, and I asked if they wanted to say anything to you." Marcus opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of handwritten letters. The first was from a young couple who had moved to Arizona after being harassed out of the neighborhood. "We watched the footage of what happened to you. We cried. Not because it was sad, because finally, someone stood up. Someone didn't back down. Someone showed the world what we experienced but could never prove. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Thank you for being stronger than we were." The second letter was from a retired teacher, the one who'd been cited for garden decorations. "I'm 73 years old. I've seen a lot of injustice in my life, but I've also seen a lot of cowardice. People who know right from wrong, but choose wrong because it's easier. You chose right.
You chose right while your daughter watched. That little girl is going to grow up knowing what courage looks like. That's more valuable than any house. Marcus read through all 11 letters. Some were angry, not at him, but at Victoria, at the system, at the neighbors who had looked the other way. Some were grateful. Some were heartbroken. But all of them said the same thing in different ways. Thank you for not staying silent. Why did you do this? Marcus asked Reynolds. Because I needed to see the faces of the people I hurt. And I needed them to see that someone from the other side acknowledged what happened to them. Reynolds looked down at his hands. I start my community service next month. 200 hours. It's not enough. Nothing will ever be enough, but it's something.
What are you going to do? The judge assigned me to a housing advocacy organization. They help families who face discrimination in housing. I'll be answering phones, doing paperwork, whatever they need. Reynolds laughed bitterly. The irony isn't lost on me. Maybe that's the point. Maybe irony is how we learn. Maybe. Reynolds turned to leave, then stopped. Mr. Bennett? Yeah? I hope your daughter has the best life. I hope she never experiences what those families experienced. And I hope... He stopped, struggling. I hope someday she can tell people that the man who threatened her father eventually tried to make things right, even if he never succeeded. I'll tell her. Reynolds nodded once, then walked back through the gates. That evening, Marcus and Emma had dinner in the dining room Sarah had designed, a room meant for big family gatherings that would now only ever hold 2. But somehow, it didn't feel empty. Sarah's presence filled the spaces between them, invisible but undeniable. Daddy, can I ask you something? Always. Why didn't you yell at the mean people? Marcus set down his fork. What do you mean? When they were being mean to you, you just stood there. You were really quiet, but I could tell you were upset. Why didn't you yell? Marcus thought about how to explain this to a 6-year-old. Do you remember what happens when you shake a bottle of soda? It explodes everywhere. Right. And does the explosion fix anything? Emma thought. No, it just makes a mess. Exactly. When people are being mean, they want you to explode. They want you to make a mess. Because then they can point at the mess and say, see, I told you he was the problem. But if you stay calm, if you stay quiet, then the only mess is the one they're making themselves. So staying quiet is like not shaking the bottle? Something like that. It's hard though, really hard. Sometimes, all you want to do is shake and shake until everything explodes. But your mommy taught me that the quiet is stronger than the noise. She taught me that dignity doesn't need to shout. Emma nodded slowly. I think I understand. Good, because someday people might be mean to you too. And when that happens, I want you to remember what you learned tonight. Stay quiet? Stay strong. There's a difference, but they look the same from the outside. After dinner, Marcus took Emma to the backyard, another space Sarah had designed, with a garden she'd never planted and a swing set she'd never pushed Emma on. Marcus had finished both himself, following the plan Sarah had left behind. Emma ran to the swings immediately. Push me, Daddy! Push me high! Marcus pushed, and Emma soared upward, laughing with a pure joy that only children know. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Sarah would have loved. Daddy? Yes, sweetheart? Do you think Mommy can see us right now? Marcus looked up at the sky, at the colors bleeding into each other, at the first stars beginning to appear. I think she can. Good, because I want her to know we're happy. Are you happy, Emma? Really happy. She pumped her legs harder, swinging higher.
I have a purple room and new friends and chocolate chip pancakes for sleepovers. And I have you, Daddy. You're the best part."
Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. He kept pushing, kept watching his daughter fly toward the sky, kept thinking about Sarah and everything she'd given them. "You're the best part too, sweetheart. You're the best part of everything." Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus walked through the house Sarah had designed. He touched the walls she'd chosen, the fixtures she'd picked, the colors she'd agonized over during those long nights when the pain was too much, and dreaming was all she had left. He ended up in the living room, in front of the fireplace she'd wanted for Christmas mornings. On the mantel sat a framed photo. Sarah and Emma, taken 6 months before the diagnosis, both of them laughing at something Marcus had said from behind the camera. "We made it," he whispered to the photo. "We're home." He thought about everything that had happened since that night at the gates. The confrontation, the viral footage, the interviews, Victoria's confession, the letters from families who had suffered in silence for years, the slow, painful process of healing that was still ongoing. None of it had been easy. None of it had been what he planned. But all of it had led here, to this house, to this moment, to a life that finally felt like the one Sarah had dreamed about. Marcus turned off the lights and walked upstairs. He checked on Emma one last time. She was asleep, teddy bear clutched to her chest, fairy lights glowing softly above her bed. "I love you, princess," he whispered. He went to his own room and lay down in the center of the bed that was still too big for one person. But tonight, like every night since Victoria's confession, the emptiness didn't hurt as much. Sarah was here. She was in every room, every color, every carefully planned detail. And she was in Emma. In her eyes, her laugh, her fierce little spirit that refused to be broken by anything the world threw at her. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about his father, who had worn the same boots for 12 years so his children could have new shoes. He thought about Sarah, who had designed a house from a hospital bed so her daughter would always have a home. He thought about Emma, who had looked at the people threatening her father and felt sorry for them instead of afraid. He thought about all the people who had underestimated him, dismissed him, tried to erase him. And he thought about how every single one of them had been wrong. The house settled around him, creaking softly in the way that old houses do. But it wasn't just settling. It was breathing. It was alive with memories and dreams and the love of a woman who had poured everything she had into walls she would never see completed. Marcus Bennett had spent his whole life being judged by what people could see. His clothes, his car, his background. But tonight, lying in the house his dying wife had designed for their daughter, he understood something that Victoria Ashford and Reynolds and all the others had never grasped. The things that matter most are invisible. Love is invisible. Dignity is invisible. The quiet strength that carries a man through impossible nights and impossible fights, that's invisible too. But the results aren't. The results are a little girl sleeping soundly in a purple room. A house that stands as a monument to love that outlasted death. A community that finally saw its own ugliness and chose to change. Marcus took a deep breath and let it out slowly. True power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to prove anything or convince anyone. It simply exists, steady and unshakable, waiting for the moment when it's needed most. And when that moment comes, it doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't beg for recognition. It just stands there, quiet and certain, and lets the truth speak for itself. Marcus Bennett closed his eyes and slept deeply, peacefully, completely. he was home, and no one would ever make him feel like he didn't belong there again.